Okay, so an obvious queer object would be something that someone takes with them in a queer pride parade, for instance. So a placard. Classic placard might be, we're here, we're queer, get used to it, people hold it up, wave it around. Something like that is something which very much speaks to the sense of community, a sense of identity and a politics of queer life. So the placard is probably the most obvious object. The rainbow flag, of course, has a history that dates back to the 1970s, which is quite interesting. But also the clothing that people wear in a case like that, that's maybe glittery and sparkly and not the kind of thing you'd wear generally wandering down Lambton Quay. Something like that. You know, those are obvious kind of queer objects, I think. A non-obvious queer object would be something that's not obviously signifying queerness in itself. It might be a telephone, which plays an important role in networks of queer social connectedness. For instance, the telephone line, the helpline, which was really a development of the 1970s and 80s. The telephone doesn't look like a queer object. There's nothing inherently queer about it, but it allows a set of community building activities, political kind of movement, people to ring in and get support and to find a community for themselves. Okay, so now that we know what a queer object may look like, let's have a look at an example from the collection. Alright, this started life as a very ordinary policeman's helmet owned by a sergeant called Trevor Morley, who was responsible for arresting Carmen, the very well-known celebrity, probably in the 1960s. When she turned 70 though, in the late 2000s, he presented this to her somewhat queered up, purple, with a thing on the front and red and a bit of glitter to make it a really queer kind of thing. If we tip it upside down, what we see on the inside: to Carmen, happy 70th birthday and thanks for the memories. Hello New Zealand, the money or the bag? In 2008, Air New Zealand undertook the Pink Flights, taking New Zealanders to Mardi Gras in Sydney. This was one of the objects that lucky travellers could take with them on their Trans-Tasman journey, a delicious, lovely pink bag to mark the occasion and a memento to remember it afterwards. Something that on the face of it doesn't look essentially queer actually has a really interesting queer history. This sign was held up in a protest during homosexual law reform in 1985. It's a reference to a petition which allegedly 800,000 New Zealanders signed. Several signatures, many in fact, were signed multiple times. There were signatures from Mickey Mouse and Donald Duck and a number of other fictitious characters. And so this sign saying, I signed it a lot, and in actual fact the 800,000 is nothing like it at all. Quite a famous little moment from the homosexual law reform campaign. Whether something is obviously queer or less obviously queer, that only has meaning in the context in which we explore, wear, display or use the object that we're talking about. So a sign in one context is queer if we know what it's all about. A pink bag is queer if we know the flight it was taken on. And a telephone is queer if it entered into a whole network of opportunities and social possibilities. So really, context is the key.